So let me just share my screen. All right. So like I mentioned in class to all of you, I don't think I'll make this exact booklet available because you can kind of write down the things I say anyway. You don't really need this booklet. So remember how I said that you write your own booklet in the way that I want you guys to make sure that you're writing heaps in our classes, okay? You're writing everything down because the more you write things down, the more it actually goes in your brain, you can remember it easily. So I don't want you to just sit back and listen. Even though that's important, I want you to listen and understand. Make sure you're writing the whole time. So, set the scene. So let's just talk about setting really quickly. Setting is one of the narrative conventions, okay? So we'll go over all of the narrative conventions in more detail, I think, next week on Sunday. So the second lesson, the second Sunday lesson. But today we're just going to focus on setting. Now, most of you should already know what setting is. Setting is the environment where your story takes place. Now, with Gate in the writing section, you get a prompt, okay, which can be an image or a quote. Now, for an image, a lot of this times this kind of will be easy because you can see the background of the image, okay? So let me just give you an example. And the reason why I'm bringing this example up is because this is very similar to the image that I actually had in my gate test about, I don't know, 7 years ago. So something like this. I don't think it was this exact photo, but something like this, okay? Let's say you get this photo as a prompt in the writing section of the test. So just look at it for a second and in your head, just think, okay, what is the setting? One. And two, what type of feeling do you get from it? Or I'm going to use the word vibe, but don't use the word vibe in your class or in school because your teacher will say it's a bit of an informal word. But what vibe do you get from this photo? So think, how does this photo make you feel? The background, sorry. Is it a pleasant background? Would you like to be in the background? Or it seems unpleasant, you're scared, or if you are struggling with that and you feel very neutral towards the background, you're like, oh, I don't think it makes me feel happy or it makes me sad. Just think about, put yourself in that background and think about things that you might feel, smell, hear. So just for a second, I want you to think to yourself, look at the background, what's going on? What is it? All right. So I know I won't give you guys much time to think because this is a video, so I need to keep going. But so we're looking at this background right now and it looks to be like some sort of garage or tool shed. So we're not sure. All we see is that there are lots of tools in here. It's an enclosed setting, right? So it's not out in the open, it's very enclosed. There's lots of metal. There's someone standing in the back. So that does technically count as being within your setting. So yeah, what type of colors? There's a lot of gray colors. It's pretty dull. Lighting is kind of dark compared to the guy here and what's going on outside. So these are windows, so we can see that outside is much lighter than inside. Anything else we can pick out? Not really, okay? So let's say if you got this in the writing section of the gate test. You would just spend a few minutes in your planning dot pointing everything I just said. So you would go dark colors, metal, tools. The only lighting are these like fluorescent lights or if you don't know what fluorescent mean, that means like really, really bright. Or you could say like bright lights, but the lights are very artificial. It's not sunlight, okay? It's artificial light. Um, Anything else? Yeah, dull colors. And there's a man in the back, which looks like he's also working. All right, so I'll dot point everything like that in my plan. Then, just like we did in class, then you turn each one of those dot points into its own sentence, okay? So we did all of this last Sunday's lesson, so you can refer back to the notes. But if we just go back to this worksheet here, let's just have a look at these questions that you can ask yourself that really force you to think about how you can write about the setting. So some of these questions will sound a little bit difficult, so I might have to explain some of them to you. So the first question, so write this down. Does the scene take place indoors or out? This is pretty easy. Indoors, right? This one is indoors, but you might get a prompt which is half maybe. So let me think how this could happen. Let's say it's a house but no roof. Okay, so that's like a very extreme example, but let's say you get a prompt. It's an image of a house, but the roof has been taken off. Okay, then that's interesting. Think about, oh, okay, what's the effect of me being half indoors and half outdoors? So this one, it's indoors. So what's the effect of that? So just think to yourself, what's the effect of this image being set indoors versus if we were out in the open and there were tools in the open? So just think for a sec. So the effect of it being indoors versus outdoors is that I'm just going to write this here, but make sure you guys are writing this down on the paper in front of you. So it's indoors, and the effect of this is that, you feel a little trapped, or I don't know if you guys know what claustrophobic means, but claustrophobia is the fear of tight spaces. Okay. So this is a little definition for you guys. So maybe just write it down. So remember how I said last week you should try and put in a little dictionary page in your book, in your English book. Write this one down, please. So claustrophobia is a fear of tight spaces. So if you feel claustrophobic, this is the adjective. And this means you feel scared of tight spaces. So maybe that's how you feel right now looking at this background. It's very enclosed. It's not a huge indoor area. It's quite small. So this is the effect of it. Now, I want you to think for a second, and we'll look at another example of an image, but can you think of an image where it's set indoors, right? But the fact that it's indoors is a good thing, makes you feel good. So think about what type of image, or what would an image be of where an indoor setting is better than it being set outside. So just think for a second. All right, so one example is where the opposite would be true, is if it's set indoors while there is a storm outside, right? So if we were like in this indoors shed and then, I don't know, somehow the windows are bigger and we could see that there was like a huge storm and like a cyclone or a tornado or something, then being indoors is a much better thing than being outdoors, right? So it all depends on the context and what's going on. All right. So just make sure you've written all of this down. I'll just give you a second to write make sure you've written all of this down. Okay. We'll move on. Is the space light or dark? Let's have a look. I would say generally this is a dark space, even though there's some pops of light, I guess you could say. Or maybe for a second, you guys think, what are there pops of light on in this image? So it's generally dark, most of it's dark, but what are the things that are lit up or the bright areas of this image? So here we can see that the man is kind of bright here. There's like a light shining on him, right? And also the windows outside are pretty light as well. Okay. Now think, what is the effect of that? This is now when we're going to the extension, right? So this is beyond you guys' year levels. Usually in an image, things that are dark are portrayed as very negative or not spooky, don't use the word spooky, gloomy or mysterious. Things that are light are usually portrayed as very positive or happy, safe. So the tool shed is dark, right? There's dark lighting. So maybe we, are in a very negative setting or a very uncomfortable setting, right? I'll add the word uncomfortable here because it doesn't have to be like as aggressive as gloomy. It can just be like you're just slightly uncomfortable because it's the things that are light are the things that we are positioned to like, right? So the fact that the man is kind of light and the windows are kind of light means that in our story, the setting is scary or mysterious or uncomfortable. And it would be the character's job to be very, positive or all of that. So here, the space is dark, mostly. Dark setting. Now, is the space large or small? By the way, space doesn't literally mean, in this context, space doesn't literally mean the distance between things. Space is another word for area, okay, or environment, I guess. So is the space large or small? Well, when we look at this, it's kind of small, right? It's not the biggest tool shed. So it's pretty small. So just think, I think we kind of touched on it with this first question. What's the impact of being in a very small setting versus being in a very big setting? So just think. Well, think about it. If you're in a small room, you feel more, like I said, claustrophobic. That was a word we used. Or trapped, or very alone, maybe, or maybe it's very crowded. So here, or cluttered. So if you don't know what cluttered means, some of you might not know what cluttered means. Cluttered means messy. Messy, things everywhere. Okay, so just add this to your definitions. Cool. So it's small. It makes us feel claustrophobic, makes us feel trapped, we're uncomfortable, right? And imagine in your head if you had an image of a very big, huge castle or huge room, right? You would feel less trapped. It's more comfortable, okay? All right. How does the space affect the character's movements? All right, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So I'm just going to talk for a little bit and explain what's going on here. Now, from here on, notice how we start bringing in characters, okay? So a good writer will have a good setting. They'll have good characters. They'll have good plot, good conflict. These are all the narrative conventions, which I'm going to teach you guys on Sunday. But a great writer, okay, and the things that will give you really, really top marks is if you don't look at these things as separate boxes to tick, but you kind of link them or make sure that they go together well, right? So let me give you an example. It's really, really common practice in good writing for the setting to predict or reflect the characters. Okay. So let me just write that down for you guys because it's kind of a long sentence. This is really, really, really important. Okay, so just follow what I'm writing here. It is really important and common practice. Common practice means it's done a lot in good writing for the setting. Let's see if I can. Setting to reflect and predict the character. Okay. And for those of you who really want to extend yourselves, this technique is called pathetic fallacy. Okay. So whenever you hear the phrase pathetic fallacy, which you'll hear in high school, you're going to be like, what the hell does that mean? Well, you're going to know. So think about, for example, let me think of a text which a lot of you guys will have seen or read. Let's say Harry Potter, right? Most of you should know what Harry Potter is, I hope so. If you don't, maybe do a quick Google search. Very, very popular kids' books, and they have movies as well. Anyway, Harry Potter is set in a castle, a really, really old, dark castle. Actually, I might show you guys. Sorry. Hogwarts is the name of the castle that they live in, okay? Now, obviously, when you look at this castle, do you think it's like a very positive setting or a negative setting? What gut instinct do you get when you look at this? So all of you should have said negative, right? Now, I want to make sure you guys understand, negative doesn't mean it's ugly or it's like horror and there's monsters everywhere, okay? This is actually quite a beautiful castle. Like it's really, it looks really pretty, but it's really, really dark, okay? So we get kind of like a scary feeling from it. This is a setting that would be in like a scary movie, for example, right? So now that you know the setting is like this, the reason why the author has chosen to make the setting very dark and spooky is because a lot of the things that happen in the text are dark and spooky, right? There's a lot of things which go wrong. The text is about wizards. The main character is a young child who has to fight all of these, like monsters and all of this. So see here, the setting reflects what happens to the character. The dark setting, the scary setting predicts how this character is going to face a lot of dark and scary things, right? So it's very simple. Once you realize that, then it becomes really, really easy to write good settings and characters, okay? They should link to each other. So here, for example, we have the question, how does a space affect the character's movements? All right. So let's think about what this question is asking us. So it's saying, how does a setting, let's go back to our original photo. How does this setting affect the way that this character's movements? So the way you should think about this is, if you were that character, what would your movements be in this environment? So let me give you an example. This is the activity we did on Sunday, which just passed. I made you guys write a creative writing piece about being in a classroom, okay? So let's take that exact one. So being in a classroom. What are your movements like when you're in a classroom? What are some, I don't know, common moves that you do? Just think, how does your body move? One, does it move a lot? Does it not move? When it does move, what does it do? So when you're in a classroom, these are common movements, right? One, you're sitting, right? And usually you're sitting pretty still. So you're not really moving that much in a classroom, but you're sitting still. What about some other What are some other instances where you might move in a classroom? So you can think to yourself, well, you could reach for your water bottle. Writing, right? Hopefully, you guys are writing in my class. So writing with the pencil in your hand. And see, notice the more detail I add to it, the better it sounds. So if I just had writing, it sounds, yeah, okay, writing. But writing with the pencil in your hand, more detail, it sounds better, right? What's some other moves? You can fidget in class. You can tap your foot or bounce your leg up and down. What are some other things you do? You can put your hand up to answer a question, right? Notice how I keep going. So this is easy for you guys because this is a setting you guys are all really familiar with. But it does get harder when you get a setting like this, right? It's not familiar for you guys. So this is where you have to use your imagination really well. Think about what movements this guy would do in this garage. You kind of get like a hint because there's this guy behind him. So one move which he might do is, I don't know, I don't really know how to use that many tools. Where he picks up tools. He maybe uses a hammer on a nail. I don't know. I'm picking really basic stuff because I don't really know much about this setting either. Let's see what else. You might put different pieces of metal together. You might walk from one end of the garage to the other. What about with this guy? What might he do with this guy? Maybe you could shake his hand. Maybe when they first see each other that day. What else? I'm looking around. I don't know if this is a chair or not, but maybe if there is a chair, you could sit down in the chair for a break. Especially, if you notice he's quite old, you'll probably have to sit down and take a break. Right. So these are a few moves which this character might do in the setting. Now we're getting harder. How does the space affect their thoughts? Now, this is when you're going to have to start really using your imagination to fill in the gaps. So we're moving further and further away from what the image gives you and more into your brain filling in the gaps, okay? So think about in real life, all right? I want you guys to just take a second to just like put your pencil down and just really follow what I'm saying, okay? So you guys, let's say you are in school, right? And you're talking to your friends, right? Recess or lunch. If your friend is sad, do they need to tell you, I'm sad, for you to know that they're sad? What are some ways that you can guess that your friend is feeling sad without them telling you? Just think. Maybe they look sad, okay? They have like a frown on their face or they're really quiet. Or I don't know, they have bloodshot eyes, they have red eyes, you can tell they've been crying, okay? So through their face, you can kind of tell what that person is thinking, right? Or let's say, I'm sure, all of you watching, your mum has been angry at you before, your dad's been angry at you before, okay? How can you tell that your parent is angry at you without them telling you, okay? There's like a look that parents do. I can tell when my mum's angry at me, I can tell when my dad's angry at me because, they look angry. So now I want you to think about how the environment that character is in can influence their mood. If you guys remember the word influence, we talked about it last Sunday. Okay. So just try and remember quickly for a sec. What does influence mean? Influence means to affect something or persuade something or to like have an impact, right? So how can a setting impact your thoughts? What thoughts do you guys commonly have when you're in a classroom? You know, I'm in a classroom all the time. I'm still at uni, right? So I'm always in classrooms. And thoughts that I commonly have in classrooms are, wait, do I remember learning about this? What time does class end? Or you could be thinking, oh, this is really good. I understand what she's talking about. That's a good thought to have. Or another good thought to have is like, wow, she explains things really well. Hopefully you guys all have that thought in my class. Or you could have negative thoughts. You could have, I'm so tired. I didn't sleep well last night. Now I'm stuck in this classroom. Or you could have, oh my gosh, I'm really hungry. Can't wait for the break. Okay. These thoughts are all thoughts that students commonly have in classrooms. But let's say you're in this setting now. What thoughts would you have being around all these tools? Just think. I know you guys probably haven't been in this like environment before in a garage. But just think, if you're in this garage, what thoughts would you have to yourself? Honestly. Well, I would be looking around being in curiosity. Okay. Curiosity being to be curious of things. You guys should all know what that means. So I would have a lot of curiosity because I would be very confused and interested about what all these tools do. That's one thought I might have. Another thought I might have is a little bit of fear that the tools might, I don't know, fall on me or hit me. I might step on one, okay? Because it's really, really, really crowded in this garage. That's why I feel like that. Okay? Now that's us. That's if the character was, like us, young, not familiar with tools, okay? But let's say this character, if we're writing the story from this guy, he seems like he would be pretty comfortable in this setting, right? And we can tell he has a little smile on his face. So his thoughts are probably, you know, very organized. He probably thinks, oh, I need to do this and then do this. So he's very determined, maybe. He's maybe very hardworking in this environment because he goes, oh, you know, I need to use all these tools and fix and finish all my projects, right? That's his thoughts. So notice how setting interacts with the character. They're not two separate things, okay? Together. You need to think about how they work together in an image. Otherwise, your story would turn out completely different, all right? So constantly imagine. This is actually the biggest tip that I'm going to tell you guys, and it's often really hard to explain. And I try to tell my students this, in year 11 and 12 as well. So just for a second, try and understand this tip very well. I always imagine how a story would feel or read differently if one part of it was switched. So, for example, to try and figure out what's going on in this image, I think to myself, okay, instead of an old man, what if we had I don't know, let's say like young girl, right? Let's take this image and in our head replace this old man with a young girl. How would the meaning or impact of the image change? So everything's the same. The girl's in the same position as him. She's got her hands on her hips. She's wearing this apron. How would the image change to you? So we went from being an old man in a garage to a young girl in a garage. How would that change? And the young girl's got a smile on her face. Think to yourself, how might that change? Well, this one, we look at it and we go, oh, okay, it's really sweet because let's say he's old, but he still enjoys, probably something he's been doing for a while. So this is maybe an old hobby of his that he still enjoys. So age isn't stopping him. But if it was a young girl, we'd be thinking, oh, that young girl is really brave because this is usually an environment that we think about men being comfortable in, especially old men, okay? Or not old men, but you guys are home. I guarantee you, if you go ask your dad, hey, dad, do you have tools in your garage? He'll probably say yes, okay? But if you ask your mom, what are the types of tools we have in our garage? Most likely they won't be fully sure, right? So if we have a young girl here, we are positioned to think, oh, she's really brave and good on her for being in an environment where she's uncomfortable with. Whereas this one, we're thinking, oh, okay, it's very sweet. This man has been in this environment forever. Does that make sense? So often in your head, if you think about how the meaning of the text would change if something was different, it'll really help you. All right. Enough yapping about this one. How does the space affect their interactions? Okay, now we have the word interaction. So I'm not sure if you guys will know what interactions means. Some of you maybe will. Interactions is behavior and actions with or towards other people. Or other things. So just think, how does this environment affect the way that this guy interacts with maybe this other guy in the background? So remember that tip I just gave you. Imagine if these two were in a completely open space. How would we imagine them interacting versus the fact that it's in this tool shed? Now, how do we imagine the two interacting? So when I imagine these two interacting, I think of maybe they're working together because it's a really small space, one. So they have to be around each other a lot. Two, they have to share tools, right? Because they're in the same garage. So they're working together. So we can expect that they'll interact quite well, right? Now I want you to look at this setting. I'm not sure if you guys have watched Hunger Games, but let's say, let me find a good setting for us to look at. This one. Mm, this isn't a good one. Okay. What's going on here? There's people fighting, okay? So why? Because around them, you can't really see well in this photo, but imagine that you can. Yeah. Around them, there are a lot of weapons, okay? See, this guy's holding a spear. What else is in the setting? There are a lot of weapons here. What else is going on in the setting? There's a guy with a knife, okay? So the setting makes you realize or think that, oh, okay, these two are going to fight. But with this one, we get the sense that they're working together, okay? They're working together. Small space, they share tools, and they interact well with each other. That's the image we have in our head. Okay. How are the characters positioned in the space? So, how are they positioned? This just means like, are they positioned close together, far apart? Are they doing different things, same things? So in this image, how are they positioned? Well, the old man is positioned at the front of the photo. Okay. The other man, which we can't really see well, so I'll go, man two or other man, is in the background, and he isn't actually facing the camera. He's kind of turned away, working. So what does that make us think about the setting or the characters both? Well, the fact that the old man is in the front, he seems like the boss, okay? So we get a sense that this space or setting is run by the old man. He's the one that runs it, or owned by the old man. So the setting is run slash owned by the old man. Now, how do they perceive the space differently? Okay, perceive might be a word that you guys aren't familiar with, but can you guess? So just read this sentence and guess for a second what perceive means. All right. So I want you guys to write this down in your vocab, your dictionary page. To perceive is a verb, right? And it means to, this one's a hard one to define actually. To perceive something is to realize that it exists a little. Like, realize that it exists. Let me see if the dictionary can give us a better meaning, better definition. Yeah, to become aware or conscious of something, to come to realize or understand, okay? So to become aware of something, to realize something, okay? So how do the characters like realize their setting differently or have different opinions on the setting? Well, kind of like what we said here. The old man perceives the setting as very familiar to him, comfortable. How else? What other opinion do you guys think he has of this garage? Well, judging by his face, he seems very, um, proud of it. We're guessing that it's his. Now, how does this other man perceive the space differently? Maybe the other man is more, you know, out of his comfort zone. Maybe he perceives it as a little bit more difficult. We're not sure. Okay, we're using our imagination now. All right. How does a space create or resolve conflict? Okay, this will go back to what we said before, where a setting can either make you feel uncomfortable or comfortable. Here, even though we said the setting was dark and gloomy, we don't feel like it's creating problems, okay? Not really. So here we would say the setting resolves conflict. It's very familiar to the characters, and it seems to be the starting point. But this is, like I said, where your imagination starts to take control. You could look at this setting and come up in your imagination with a way in which something in this setting could go wrong, Okay. So maybe some of you might look at this image and go, actually, I feel like in this setting, this guy in the back seems really mysterious. So the fact that, they're in a very small, claustrophobic setting means that this guy could potentially, like, I don't know, turn on this old man and cause a fight or something, like a thriller book, right? A thriller narrative. So it could create, if you imagine it differently. So what I want you guys should really understand that for writing, your imagination is in control, but there's certain things that you can't imagine outside of the image. So what I mean by that is like use your imagination, but only do it once you've, identified all the key parts of this image. So a bad, let's go back to the gate test, right? If you get this image in the gate test, every student will need to write about there being a garage or a shed. Okay. You can't like imagine, I don't know, let me think of something that would be bad. You can't say like, imagine that this shed is actually a car. Okay. It's clearly not. And that is silly use of your imagination because you haven't kept it to the prompt. But once you identify all the very obvious things, okay, there's a garage, there's two men, then you can start using your imagination. Oh, okay, well, maybe these tools are tools for creating something specific, like, a robot. Okay. Or maybe they're actually rivals. So they are competing to create the best robot one on one. Okay. So then that's when your imagination can take charge. Don't use your imagination at the very early stages for silly things. Okay. Like imagine this guy is a human waist up, but then a horse waist down, right? That's silly. All right. What objects are representative of the space? Okay. This is kind of like, I'm sure you guys would have done this in your head earlier on in this worksheet. What are the objects you see that make you take a guess about what the setting is? So for me, you can't really see it that well, but it's the tools, right? So I don't know. I can't really see, excuse me. I can't really see exactly what the tools are, but I'm guessing like there's a hammer somewhere in here or a wrench. Another thing that makes me realize that it's a garage and that these men are working in it is the fact that this guy's wearing an apron. Okay. That's really important object in this image. And because imagine if this man wasn't wearing an apron, how would you think differently of him? Well, maybe you'd think that, he's just walked down to take a look inside his shed and this is like a guy that he's hired to do the work for him. But the fact that he's wearing the apron tells us that, okay, he's the one that's actually working in this setting. So that contributes to what we think of him as a character. Okay, does that make sense? So I would say the objects that are representative of the setting here are the guy's apron, the tools, there's workbenches on the side, right? Benches that you can work on, so desks. They're not just like floating. It's not just a storage room, is what I'm trying to say. You can actually work in it. What themes are represented by the space? Okay. Themes. All right. Most of you guys should know or have been taught what themes are in school. But just to be on the safer side, I'm just going to quickly explain it to you. Themes are broad ideas. And now, if you remember in our very first lesson, when I did that diagram for you guys about why authors write texts, they write text because they have some sort of purpose behind it or themes that they want to try and put out in the world. Okay. So, for example, I think I used this example last week as well. If you have a short story about one turtle helping his friend, another turtle cross the river, what are the themes in this story? Well, one, you have the theme of friendship, okay? Another theme you can have is about nature. Another theme you can have is about being, determined to get over problems in your life, right? So themes are things like these. Now, if you look at this setting, what are some themes you think might be explored? This is really hard, okay? So you're going to have to really use your imagination here. What would be an author's reason? So imagine if you turn this image into a short story. What would be some of the themes that an author could want to talk about using this setting? All right. So in my opinion, one thing that the author one theme that the author could want to talk about is maybe the theme of, actually we can say friendship again if we use our imagination to imagine that these guys are working together. We could use the theme of age, right? So not letting age hold you back. This guy still looks really healthy and is still working despite being old. What's another one? Let's think, garage, tools. The theme of being really, I don't know, helpful. Maybe this guy makes tools to give, I don't know, to the world, or tools, or maybe he builds things for his family. Okay. We're guessing. I'm using my imagination, but that's what you have to do in writing. So use your imagination, think about what's going on in this image, what's the purpose of it, and then think about what themes they translate to. So when I look at this image, I think it would probably lead to a very positive story. Okay. So positive things that are in this image. Age, this guy's old, but he's still, active, still happy. Friendship, he's working with someone, he's not alone, and being helpful, giving back. He's making things, okay? And he's probably not making all of them for himself. So he's probably making things for people, being really selfless. What role does the space play in the story? This one I think is, I would kind of leave this for you guys. I'll explain what the question is asking. It's saying, sometimes the only purpose of a setting is just to add to the plot. Okay. So let's say in some texts, the only thing that's important about the setting is that it tells you what's going on. Let's say for the classroom example, when I made you guys write the creative about, being in tutoring, the setting of the classroom for most of you was just, to show the reader reading it that, okay, yeah, we are in a classroom and it's talking about teaching in school, right? In some texts, the actual main source of the problem, or the actual, I don't know, beef of the text, or the actual thing that's important in the text, is the setting. So I'll give you an example. There's a genre called like journey or adventure books. In these books, let's say, for example, a character travels different places. Okay, and the whole center of the text is that the setting is the conflict, right? So let's say, e.g., for example, you have a book about I don't know, the world's ending and climate change, and let's say there's natural disasters all happening at the same time. So the story is about a young, maybe a family, which has to escape and survive these natural disasters. So see here, the setting is the book. It's the cause of the conflict. Everything revolves around the setting. In other ones, the setting can just, help you understand what's actually going on. So based on what we've done now, I'm just going to write like a quick, short, good setting paragraph. One. And as I'm writing, I want you to write down with me. Okay. And I'm going to look at our plan. Okay. So it's indoors. I said it's dark and small. So these said that they were very negative. So the negative bits were that it was that it was indoors, very small area, and it was dark. But I said that it was still a positive setting because the character looked really comfortable. Okay. So the character made all these, I'm just going to copy paste what we wrote here. I said picks up tools, uses hammer. What did I say? I said he interacts, works together with the other man. And the old man, how are they positioned in the space? I said the old man is at the front. All right, so now I'm going to write a paragraph of setting. So boom, first sentence, right? So I've literally, in this sentence, I cover all of this stuff, right? We know that they're indoors. We know that it's dark. I haven't talked about it being small yet, so I'm going to probably talk about that in the next sentence. And we've described the lights, okay? So now I want to talk about it being small and it being very crowded, but in a good way. So the walls were close together and there was barely any room to walk without knocking a tool off the tables or hooks on the wall. Right? So through this, we know that it's small because I said that there was barely any room to walk without knocking a tool off the tables or hooks on the wall. Now, this is something that I just did here, which is really important. And I want you guys maybe to write this down. I think we did 2 tips last week. So now this is tip number 3. Show, don't tell. Okay. This is easiest tip ever, which your teacher should have already told you. Instead of saying the room was small, find a way you can say that without using the word small. Okay. So what are some things that indirectly happen when a room is small? Maybe the area is tight. You could barely walk around. That's the one I used. I said you barely had any room to walk around. Or you could say, yeah, that's pretty much all you can really say. See? But by saying this, you can tell that an area is small without saying the room is small. Right? That's what I did there. What else? Now we have all the positive stuff. So now we have to talk about the old man being at the front. So the main character, he's doing all of this stuff and he's working together with the other man. Okay. I don't know. You could name him or you could keep it the old man. Let's name him. Let's say, what does he look like? Let's say he's Jeff, right? Okay. stood proudly with a smile on his face and his hands on his hip. So notice what I did here. Remember I said, how does the space affect their thoughts? And I said, he looks organized, hardworking, all of that. We could also say he feels proud because he owns all this stuff. So Jeff stood proudly with a smile on his face and his hands on his hip. He started walking around and picking up all the tools, either putting them in his hand or in one of the pockets on his dark gray apron. So now let's talk about him working together with the other man. He brushed past, Michael, his new apprentice, and handed him a screwdriver. Michael gave a grateful smile and shook his hand. Okay. So it's positive. We've talked about all of this stuff. Anything else we want to add? Obviously, we haven't really gone into it. Okay, this setting resolves conflict, very familiar to the character, seems to be the starting point. Okay, so now we can start talking about the significance of the setting, now that we've kind of described it. So we can say, this was Jeff's safe and happy place for his whole life. Looking around at the cluttered mess of metal and screws and nails brought him joy at his favorite thing to do in this world, make things for others. Okay, now we start to get the story starts to happen. All right, so let's just go over what I've done. I've described what we said at the start. Indoors, outdoors. Okay, we know it's indoors. It's dark. It's a small space. I've described some of the objects that are representative. So this one, where is that? What objects are representative of the space? We had apron, tools, desk. So I talked about the tools here and the apron here. Okay. Talked about how Jeff thinks based on what he looks like. We talked about how he interacts with other people in his setting. And then we described the themes that are represented by the space and what role the space plays in the story. Okay. So when you guys are doing your homework, or I don't know whether you've started or haven't started, just keep this next to you. And when you do it, try and remember, when you're creating a good setting, you need to work your way up. Don't go straight into, putting this at the start. Then it just sounds, bad. Try and build it up. First describe, okay, the basics. Are we indoors? Is it dark? Is it big, small, open, closed? Okay, then look at, all right, what are the specific things or objects here? Okay, how does it interact with the character? How does that make the character interact with everything around him? And then look at the themes and then the story, conflict, okay? So it should gradually build up. All right, so that's the first lesson done. Any questions you guys have about this, you can ask me on Sunday. So I'll see you then.